working on a very unusual type of archaeological site from the Ice Age that's at least nearly 13,000 years old. This location has the potential to give us a great deal of scientific information to teach us about the lives of Ice Age people in North America. In this video, we are going to use the artifacts that we find from this site to piece together an ancient puzzle, to figure out what was happening here, and will give us a look into the lives of these individuals from a time in history that is vastly different than today. The location that we're going to is where Ice Age cultures were living and making stone tools. It's a prehistoric quarry of a type of stone called chert, which is very similar to flint, and indigenous cultures relied heavily on it to make many of their stone tools from. Where we are right now is in the Hudson River Valley of upstate New York, and it's a region teeming with outcroppings of exceptionally high-grade quality of this type of stone. More than 20 years ago, I started an ongoing project here in the Hudson Valley designed for us to better understand how Ice Age cultures manufactured their stone tools, mainly their spear points, because we really don't know that much about this aspect of their lives, and very few individuals actually study it. And the site that we're working on today is puzzling because at just this one location alone, I've been able to find and map at least 16 individual sites from the Ice Age here so far. And there's probably more here. This is very strange because we don't typically see Ice Age cultural sites grouped up like this. Most of the sites that I work on from the Ice Age only have up to about a few sites at most at one location, certainly not 16 or more. So our goals for today are trying to figure out why there are so many of these sites at this one location. Were they all used at the same time by one Ice Age culture? Or were there multiple cultures using these sites at various times during the Ice Age? These are the questions that we're trying to find the answers to today. When you think of archaeology, sites such as the Roman Colosseum or the pyramids at Giza, or perhaps even the Aztec temples probably come to mind. But to the archaeologists who study Ice Age cultures, this is what a site looks like. Well, to the untrained eye, this might not look like much. But you see, there are artifacts scattered all over the surface of this site, and a lot of it is the reduction debris left over from the manufacturing of stone tools. This is called a workshop site because they were making stone tools here. And the material that they were using, the chert that they were using to manufacture those stone tools, is from a quarry just a few meters over that way. This site is a very shallow site because it only goes down 10 centimeters, and below that, all of the cultural material stops. There are two main reasons for this. One, there's only a very thin layer of soil before you get to bedrock. And two, we're on the top of a large ridge, and it's very difficult for soil to build up on the tops of large hills and ridges. In most other places in the world, if you're working on a site that's 12 to 13,000 years old, you might have to dig up to 10 feet down or even more. Since this site is so shallow, it's very unlikely that I will find any organic materials that I can radiocarbon date. This is because it's difficult for organic, perishable materials to survive for such a lengthy period of time uncovered. This type of site is what's called an open-air site. It's not a cave or a rock shelter. If it were, the overhanging shelter of the rock would protect the site from wind, rain, snow, and other natural elements, and as a result would enable organic materials to survive for much longer, because it's the natural elements of nature which actually causes organic materials to wither away with time. Such types of organic materials could be anything from the leftover food scraps that these cultures were eating, such as bones, seeds, nuts, or clamshells, to antler or bone tools, to ornate objects such as bone beads or the charcoal from their campfires, to many other things. Well, if I wasn't able to radiocarbon date these sites, and all the artifacts are stone, well then how do I know that they're from the Ice Age? Well, it's because of the techniques that were being used to manufacture the stone spear points here. At each one of these locations, these cultures were making a type of spear point that is called a fluted point. A flute is simply one or more flakes that have been removed from the base of a projectile point on each face and help in the hafting of the spear point to the spear shaft. And this technique was only used during a portion of the Ice Age and was never used again by any other later culture after that. So even though it certainly doesn't give me as a precise of a date that a radiocarbon dated organic sample would, it still gives me a relative date for when the site was being used. This is a spear point preform that was broken during the middle stages of the manufacturing process. If this wasn't broken, this likely would have been turned into a spear point. The person making this would have ultimately provided for their family with that spear point. They would have hunted animals and fed their family with it. Right around the same time these cultures were using this site, the climate was changing. The megafauna, the woolly mammoths and mastodon and other types of animals were dying off as a result of climate change. It's very possible that this spear point could have been used to hunt those animals. If you're interested in how climate change affected people during the Ice Age, I have an ebook that I wrote about it that I'll put in the description of this video if you'd like to get it. Okay, we know that these cultures were making stone spear points here during the Ice Age, but as I mentioned before, the entire Hudson River Valley is full of outcroppings of the same type of chert, and I've discovered Ice Age sites at a lot of them. So what makes this particular location so special? Is the grade of chert here a higher quality than at other nearby surrounding sources? Or does it occur here in a color that would have been more desirable to these indigenous Ice Age paleocultures? Or is it because of a completely different reason altogether? Well, the chert is a fairly high grade here, but certainly not the highest quality in the area. And there are other close by sources that have much nicer colors than the colors of the chert that occur at this location. So if these paleocultures could have obtained chert of a higher quality and of a more beautiful color and luster at other close by locations, then why did they choose this one? Why did they choose this spot? Let's look at the sites themselves and their layout to see if we can find the answer to this question there. Each one of these 16 sites are small, about 5 meters in diameter, and the distribution of artifacts are circular in shape. But what I'm finding at each site is really the evidence that is telling me what was happening here. If they were only making spear points here, then the only types of artifacts that I would be finding would be those related to spear point manufacture. But that's not all I'm finding. because at each one of these locations, I'm also finding a whole host of many other different types of artifact forms, such as end scrapers, side scrapers, gravers, and blades. These are what we refer to as formal expedient tools. Tools that were used during everyday daily lives for such uses as working animal hides into clothing and many other uses. We usually only find those types of artifacts at sites where they were living and carrying out residential activities. So now we have more pieces of the puzzle put together. Each site is small, round in shape, and that they were living at. And therefore what I think these are nuclear family dwellings. Their structure was probably some sort of a dome-shaped structure of wooden poles with animal hides stretched over them. The dome shape was to protect against the strong winds of the Ice Age. But why were there so many families living here? Does this represent multiple visits? Or were there 16 families all living here at the same time? And we still didn't answer why they chose this spot over another close by location that has better chert. Well, I think the answers to these questions can be found in what the environment was like back during the Ice Age when these cultures were living here. It was during the late Pleistocene epoch, and because of the cooler Ice Age climate, the environment consisted of tundra flora species such as spruce, sedge, and lichen. These types of plant species create an open landscape that is very conducive to long-distance travel by foot. And if you're a hunter-gatherer like these paleocultures were, you move about the landscape quite regularly, because if you stay in one area for too long, you'll have hunted all of the animals, gathered all of the wild edibles, and depleted all of the available natural resources in that area. But in northeastern North America, where seasonality is so prevalent, there is a dramatic temperature change between the seasons. Therefore, when you move about the landscape, you do it in an organized fashion. And it just so happens that many of the animal species that these cultures were hunting also did the same thing. They bi-seasonally migrated and would summer in the northern areas of the region and would winter in the southern areas of the region, such as waterfowl and herd animals. It makes sense then that these Ice Age paleocultures would follow these animals along the same migration routes twice a year during the same times of year each year. We know this because of the exotic types of stone that are found in sites from this time period in northeastern North America. Since these cultures traveled long distances throughout the year, they spend time in areas that have completely different types of stone that they used for tools. And many of these types of stone have very recognizable colors and characteristics that may only occur in one particular stone type. So when we find artifacts from sites made from that type of stone, but in a location far away from where the stone naturally occurs, we believe that as a result of seasonal movements by these cultures carrying the stone with them that they had obtained through direct acquisition and not through trading. Unlike later cultures who did a lot of trading of items and materials with other cultures that they would come in contact with, we don't really think that paleocultures did a whole lot of trading, especially with items such as stone. This is because, depending on what region they lived in, each paleo group basically had access to the same types of stone to make tools from. Therefore, they didn't really need to trade those types of items. An example of this is when we see a large percentage of materials such as yellow jasper, likely from Pennsylvania, turn up in a paleo site in northern Maine. We believe that site to be a springtime site where these cultures were spending the winter to the south in the mid-Atlantic region, where they had obtained that material and they have it with them while they travel north to their summering locations near prehistoric stone quarries of vastly different material. Biseasonal migration occurs in a bell-shaped curve, where some organisms arrive early, some arrive late, but the bulk of the migration usually either arrives at the same time, or there can be multiple smaller migration pulses where a population comes at several different moments. And since the Hudson Valley is between the wintering grounds and the summering grounds, the majority of the population of paleocultures are probably all coming through this area at about the same times of year each year. So at other nearby chert quarry locations, there may have already been other families utilizing them, and that's possibly why this location was being used. These locations are called migratory staging areas, where in different locations along a migration route, the populations will gather and stage while they rest up. And with regards to humans, not just rest up, but also tool up for the remainder of the trip by staging at areas where they can make new tools. And it just so happens that the Hudson Valley also has tremendously high-grade chert for them to make new tools from. Therefore, it would have been a very beneficial area for them to travel through. If all of these 16 sites each date to the same exact time period, it is very possible that the reason why there are so many sites at this one location is because this is what's called an aggregation site. Aggregation sites are where multiple groups of a culture all get together at certain times of the year. This is important for such things as finding spouses and sharing information. Another location that is considered to be an aggregation site is the Bull Brook site along the coast of Massachusetts. At Bull Brook, which is not a quarry or workshop related site, there are some 36 sites arranged in two large circular rings with an inner and outer ring. Some researchers think that the inner circular ring of sites represents elite status families, and interestingly enough, this similarity of an inner ring and outer ring structure of sites also occurs here with the 16 sites that we are working on today.